Let's start right away by saying that Prince of Persia The Lost Crown is $50 and it seems totally worth it. This is not an indie game. This is not a simple little bite-sized game. This is a fully fleshed out game with awesome mechanics, incredible art, and it runs insanely well on Switch. So what's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. I had the opportunity to play 3 hours of Prince of Persia The Lost Crown. Thanks to Ubisoft, it's dropping on January 18th, and it is now my most anticipated January game. They have taken Prince of Persia, mixed it with Metroidvania, definitely paid attention to Metroid Dread, and brought in a little bit of Dark Souls to create an incredible hybrid that is stunning both visually and from a gameplay experience. I freaking loved my time with Prince of Persia The Lost Crown, and while you are looking at PC footage, because that's what I played on, the game does run 60 FPS on Switch in handheld and docked mode, and while it does look a little bit muddier and a little less clear than it does on, say, my PC, it runs perfectly great, and if you're just playing on Switch and not comparing, you won't really notice much of a difference. Ubisoft has achieved a really, really nice Prince of Persia game that maybe isn't super Prince of Persia heavy, although, as I neared the end of my demo, I did start to unlock some of the time dilation powers that do make it feel much more like an OG Prince of Persia adventure. To set this up, it's a Metroidvania. You played Metroid Dread, you played any of Metroidvania type games that have released on Switch over the last 7 years, you know what you're getting into here. It's side-scrolling, there's a big map, there's a bunch of things to collect, a ton of upgrades, a lot of enemies and blockages that you'll have to return to once you unlock the next big thing. But what makes this so much better is that every element of the game is fleshed out and I'd say polished to an extreme level. This absolutely feels like it's made by a very big studio, a big team that got enough time, manpower, and money to make it happen. It does not feel like, okay, this was an afterthought, this was a side little UbiArts game. No, they really wanted to make a great Prince of Persia game, and that's why it's $50. You might say, oh my gosh, $50 for a side-scrolling Metroidvania. There's so many for $15 on the eShop, but remember the quality we got with Metroid Dread. I don't think anybody who bought Metroid Dread and played that game all the way through felt like it wasn't worth its asking price. This one's $10 less. It doesn't have Nintendo first party slammed all over it, but it does have similar quality. And it even has a similar Emmy-type robot enemy. They're not a robot this time. They're definitely scarier, and they do kind of a similar thing. But aside from that, it does feel like a very different type of Metroidvania. All right, the platforming here is definitely a big part of it. There's a lot of swinging, running, jumping, climbing, and while there's definitely some of that in Metroid Dread and plenty of other Metroidvanias, there's even more of it here in Prince of Persia. And as I progress and unlock new abilities, like the ability to dash forward or rewind backwards, it definitely seems clear that more difficult platforming is in the cards past the 3-hour mark. They're claiming this game is a 20 to 25 hour adventure, so it's definitely a meaty one, and a good chunk of that is going to be combat. The combat here is very challenging. I think straight up we need to just say this is not an easy game. I started off playing on hard, and it was one of the rare times where I had to reduce the difficulty mid-demo because it was just that punishing. Parrying here is of extreme importance, and if you just try to button mash your way through even 2 or 3 enemies, you're going to get worked. You definitely need to take your time, you need to parry, and you definitely need to take advantage of your mobility, your ability to sidestep, dash out of the way. There's invincibility frames where you can go through their character past to the other side. You've got the parry, as I mentioned, and you've got 2 different levels of superpowers that you can build up a meter by attacking and then unleash more magical special type attacks. It feels like a very fluid combat system, and you will be upgrading your character named Sargon with new combos and new abilities and new combat things as you progress. There's amulets and items, lots of things to collect, lots of ways to customize your character. Not like look, but definitely in how you decide to beat everyone up. But I found it very challenging from the jump. Started from the beginning of the game, played 3 hours, and the early sections are not uber forgiving like many games. One thing that's definitely very Dark Souls is the potion health healing mechanic. You've got limited uses of your potion vial, and it's something you can upgrade as you progress. And because of the difficulty of the combat and the nature of how frequent the combat is, it's something you definitely have to manage and pay attention to. It's not one of those games where health just comes easy and freely. Those potion uses are at a premium, and it's something you're going to want to upgrade as soon as you can, and something that will bite you in the butt if you use it too early. And I actually enjoyed that a ton because it made me play more carefully and more particularly, and not just wander my way through this adventure. There also were about 5 bosses in those 3 hours, and one of them was freaking incredible. The demoist that was helping me out said they hadn't seen anyone beat it on their first try until me, so thank you very much. But this guy was a challenge. He had many different diverse attacks, and while some of it was pattern memorization, because of the heavy emphasis on parrying, it feels like Prince of Persia is much more like real-time reaction-based instead of just pattern recognition. I think sometimes in Metroidvanias, the bosses are usually great, but they can boil down to like, okay, X, Y, Z is going to happen, and I'm going to react with A, B, C. And then X, Y, Z is going to happen, and I just got to do A, B, C. But because of the heavy emphasis on timing and parrying, and the window that is pretty small for you to get your parry off, it does feel like, okay, this is like dynamic combat that does have pattern recognition, and obviously the enemies have their tells and their different attacks, but I also got to be like in it to win it all the time. You cannot just mash your way through. You cannot just sort of coast your way through. I feel like there is an element of like Dark Souls style difficulty minus any sort of soul system or die and lose anything. But like, it's a good thing that the reloads are really quick, because otherwise it could get frustrating. I'm not saying I'm like the best person at games, and obviously I did reduce the difficulty, but I thought I would have an easy time, because usually Metroidvanias, oftentimes, especially early on, they're pretty manageable. And this one's definitely manageable, but it required a lot more focus and intention with the combat than I was expecting, and I actually found that to be a great thing. It requires you to pay attention and really take each encounter seriously, and therefore they had to make each encounter, each area, very well thought out. I think the look and feel and diversity that I experienced within 3 hours was pretty darn sweet. There's a lot of really cool environments, and it's got this like hand-painted, cel-shaded, cartoony art style that merges well with a straight-up just drawn portraits as the characters talk. It looks fantastic. It's very colorful. It's not drab. Obviously, there's a lot of sand, desert, and brown/yellow, but they also managed to bring in plenty of other colors, and it seems like the game is really going to go places, as even though you're focused mainly on a temple early on, like that temple even is very diverse in terms of the different levels. The map seems very big, and there's a lot of different options for accessibility in terms of how you want to approach this adventure. Do you want the map to be much more like obvious and say like, go over here, big icons, or do you want to kind of explore your way through? Do you want the combat to be very difficult, medium difficult, or easy? And I gotta give Ubisoft props, because between this game and their recently released Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, they've done a good job kind of letting you move the dials in terms of like, do you want to be someone who's more about exploring? Do you want to just follow the beeline path? How do you want to play this game? How can we make it work for you? And in one way, like, that's a really big step. Obviously, like, I want designers to design the game they intended to make, and Prince of Persia Lost Crown definitely feels like they had ideas, they had a motivation, and they had a goal, and they achieved it. But I also like, if it's not going to change the game dramatically, to give you the flexibility to make this game work for you. And I think that's especially kind in a Metroidvania type game, where some can get really frustrated with figuring out where to go next, and some want to just explore the map kind of OG style, like back in the day when there weren't as many legends, icons, and tells in terms of where to progress. On one hand, you've seen all of this before. Like, it's a Metroidvania. You're exploring and then acquiring and then progressing, and you're fighting and you're jumping and you're looking at the map. So it's not bringing anything amazingly new to the formula. Yet it executes on all of the elements of a Metroidvania so well that I never felt myself being pulled away or distracted. I could have sat there and played through another 3 hours of the game, and that's not something that I usually do. I'm more of a quick session gamer, so the fact that I was hooked and drawn in is a tribute to not only the interesting nature of the game world, the art, the story, the characters, the combat that was challenging and demanding, the platforming that was interesting and fun, and the power-ups that were frequent enough to keep my character evolving and growing. It's all done very well. The controls as well are very snappy, very responsive, feel great both in combat and movement. There's no part of this game that is lacking. And I think what's exciting is because they decide not to have a slow, drawn-out, easy build, this game can really go places. I felt like I was at a pretty good spot 3 hours in, where like if you told me it was 10 hours in, I would have believed you. I had good stuff going on. I was able to move quickly. Combat felt fun and fleshed out. But no, that's 3 hours in. They decided to opt for a more difficult curve in order, I hope, to deliver a more exciting back half, back third of the game. 3 hours in, I'm apparently like 20%, 15% done through a 20-hour game. So that's very intriguing. And I just hope it does evolve enough and change enough to not overstay its welcome. 20 to 25 hours is a lot for a Metroidvania, but because it's a $50 game and because there's so many systems and mechanics at play, I think they can pull it off. I just hope that they didn't front load all of the content, and if they're going to take the risk of making things sort of swoop up quickly, then they have to make sure that they can continue that. And I would say that's my only concern with this game. I think it's going to be super fun, super quality, super good value, and a super great Switch game to start off 2024. The only thing I'm a little worried about is, do they have enough to last for 20 to 25 hours to never have it feel repetitive? Because in my 3 hours, I did not find it repetitive. Enough diversity, enough big moments, enough set pieces, enough bosses, enough to pay attention to, and enough to invest in to never feel bored. And that's a huge, huge compliment to a Metroidvania that can feel, because of how many there are, very stale, very rote, very normal. Prince of Persia Lost Crown is an absolute cut above. Everything I've heard about the game before playing was that, wow, this one's really good. And I don't know if it's a great Prince of Persia game, but it's definitely a great game, and one I'll absolutely be buying and playing on release date in January. It's the 18th. I think this is going to be the first great Switch game of 2024. And Ubisoft is bringing another excellent title to Switch. Their output has been solid lately. Definitely a company that goes through ups and downs, peaks and valleys, and we don't get a ton of their stuff on Switch. But between Mario plus Rabbids, Immortals Phoenix Rising, and now Prince of Persia Lost Crown, we've got a lot of Ubi winners on our hybrid platform. So I think you guys are going to love this one. And if you're any sort of fan of Metroid Dread or the Metroidvania formula, this one is a must play. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions or comments in the section down below. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce out.